Everybody has a right to eloquence.
Welcome to Talking About Kids. I'm your host, R. Bradley Snyder, researcher, activist, and author of The 5 Simple Truths of Raising Kids. This is the second part of my episode on the cognitive health of deaf children. My guest is Donna Jo Napoli, professor of linguistics and social justice at Swarthmore College, author of fiction and science books, and co-director of Rise Videobooks. The first part focused on early language and cognitive development. This second part focuses on what Donna Jo and her colleagues are doing to improve the reading skills of deaf students. Talking About Kids is sponsored in part by the Arizona Department of Health Services Must Stop Bullying campaign through its Title V Maternal and Child Health Program. For more information, go to muststopbullying.org. If you know somebody who would benefit from a better approach to supporting deaf students, please like this episode and then share it with them. And now, the interview.
Nobody wants to harm their child. They want to do the best by their child. They've been told by the
Yeah.
medical professionals that this is the best way. Who am I? I'm not a medical professional. I'm just a linguist. I know a lot about language and I read a lot. You have to be very careful of what you read. Don't just ask a question on Google. Go to scholar.google.com.
Yeah.
Read articles that have been vetted, that are in the journals, and be careful of who runs that journal. Many times articles are put out by journals that are put out by cochlear implant companies.
Yeah.
And you have to ask who funded the research. They have to, in most journals, you have to reveal who your funders are, and you have to reveal everything about the study. So if you started your study with 400 kids and after 6 months there were only 300, and after a year there were
Right.
only 75, you have to explain that, and your results have to be on the ones that began and ended the study, all of them. You
Yep.
cannot say 90% of the children succeeded when only 35% of the children even finished the study. And in cochlear implant studies, they often don't do that. Many children leave, and they might leave for legitimate reasons. They might have moved out of the venue where it was easy to come in for this study. I'm not saying that all of them gave up, but many quit because the child was having no success with a cochlear implant, and they just quit the study. Also, be
And
very
I'm gonna add right there because again, if longtime listeners will recognize that one of the things you're talking about is something that comes up a lot in the nutrition and eating disorder literature as well. So we did several episodes on eating disorders and learned that there were a lot of fake academic articles that were funded by supplement companies that weren't real research. And so we got a good primer on that. So if you want to go back and listen to exactly how that happens in other fields, but we also have an episode on what is evidence. And we have very good academics sharing information on what is evidence. And you can go back and listen to those as well.
Oh, another
Um,
myth is that sign languages are really easy. That's something that medical professionals will tell the parents. They will say, if your child learns to sign, they're going to learn it easily. It's just going to happen for them. It's going to be a snap, and therefore they won't work at learning speech. Um, and it doesn't happen as a snap. Deaf children do recognize that signing is theirs. They zoom in
Yeah.
on signing right away and they start learning right away. But they make mistakes just like
Yeah.
speaking children, hearing children make mistakes when they are learning to speak. It isn't easier. One of the things about sign language is that your sign language teacher in high school or college, or if you take lessons from a deaf institute or whatever, is going to be extremely encouraging, going to praise you all the time. There are ways that some things about sign language are easier than things about spoken language. But overall, they're not easier. For example, if I show you the sign for tree in American Sign Language, um, and you look at it, in some ways, it can start to look like a tree to you. And so it's easier to remember. But when you ask, how do you put signs together to make a sentence? It's just as complicated
Yeah.
as putting words together to make a sentence in a spoken language. It isn't a salad of words. They have to come in a particular kind of order. And that order varies based on what information you want to stress, and whether it's asking or commanding or just stating. And all those things are true of sign languages, and different sign languages do different things in different ways. So it's not easier to learn a sign language. Your child, and your deaf child, is not lazy. Your hearing child who's got a French mama and a Hausa speaking daddy is going to learn both of them. And it isn't that um, one is easier than the other. They're just going to learn both of them because there's motivation to communicate
Right.
with mama and daddy. Your deaf child is going to work at learning to speak if there's some positive reinforcement.
And I'm gonna share here the in addition to the recommendation that you and your authors have in the article that I cited before, that there is you know moving forward that parents need to be supported and the need for visual language needs to be emphasized. And I think that we've made that case here. But this other recommendation that you make that I think gets at the heart of this issue too, and I think might help my listeners like understand how to read and look at this research and how to process recommendations. You say you recommend that there are protocols in all professions and disciplines that are inclusive of deaf people themselves in establishing ethical principles of practice that reflect and protect deaf people for the entire life cycle. That's your recommendation because it's implied in that, but it's explicit in your writing and research that a lot of these recommendations that are being made to parents are not coming from people who are deaf themselves or coming with input from deaf professionals and deaf adults.
And this is such an important point. I am a hearing speaking person. What right do I have to be talking on this podcast or anywhere about these matters? I am very aware of who I am. The article that you cited and the team that I work on, everybody is deaf. I am the only hearing person of the group. The reason I am the corresponding author often is that it's often hearing people that are connecting to us. But I will put people in touch with the appropriate person on the team, depending upon what it is they want to pursue. Um, what am I doing here? Um, uh, um, it's kind of accidental, um, and it kind of I think it's a story worth parents of deaf children hearing. And that is that once I had made some deaf friends and had started to learn something about sign languages, I I was reading an article in the New England Journal of Medicine because my husband is a health lawyer and he's a health law professor at Drexel University, Barry Furrow. and we used to have magazines, journals all over the house, and I would read them when I was in the bathroom. Uh, um, these days, everything's online. I haven't been reading those in a long time, but there was an article about a 2-year-old deaf boy who was being raised totally orally, and I was kind of shocked at it. I this was 2009, and it seemed to me so wrong-minded. So I wrote a letter to the editor in which I said, "Why aren't you telling this family to uh, connect with Deaf World right away?" And I wrote to my deaf friends and I said, "Please, will you sign the letter with me?" Well, they all looked at the letter and they said, "No, you wrote it, you send it, but let's get together." It was their suggestion. Let's form a team and let's write an article. And so we did that. Um, and our first article came out in 2010, I think. Whatever. And then we realized how, in writing that article, we realized what the advice was that people were being given and um, how difficult it was for people to judge the articles, the research that though that advice was based on. And so we started writing more and more. Now we've written over a dozen articles. One thing about the research that I really would like our listeners to pay attention to is that there's a difference between receiving auditory information and recognizing language.
Mm,
So some of the articles will say 90% of the children did such and such. And the article, one article that I'm thinking of in particular, was about being able to beat to the rhythm of the language, to every syllable. Could they make a beat for every syllable? Well, that's not recognizing language. That's recognizing beats. Music has beats too.
mm,
Many things have beats. That doesn't mean that they can distinguish a single word. It is not a measure of language. It's a measure of, can they distinguish beats? And do you have to be able to distinguish beats in order to um, speak a language? Maybe, but there are certainly languages that are based on tone and pitch. Japanese, for example, is a pitch tone language, not an intensity, not a loudness language.
right.
Whereas those beats um, and the rhythm of them, yeah, I there are languages that are not organized in that fashion. That is not a prerequisite for learning language. Um, yeah.
Well, and let's talk about the difference between language and literacy, because this is this other piece of your work. You alluded to it before about creating these video books. You are the co-director of Rise Videobooks as well. So, what's the difference then between language and literacy, and how do we go about promoting literacy among deaf children?
Right. And again, I need to say, um, I am not an education specialist. I'm a linguist, and I work with deaf people, and I pay attention to the wisdom of deaf people who have been through the system and what they are telling the world.
Hmm.
Um, so I work on developing pre-literacy skills. One thing that people need to understand about reading is that text is not language. Just like a photograph is not a person. A photograph is a representation of a person. Text is a representation of a language. Um, can you become bimodal, bilingual, just knowing text and knowing how to sign? Yes, we do talk about bimodal bilingualism. But in fact, that text is impoverished compared to speech. It doesn't have all the things that speech has, but it has a ton of stuff. It has vocabulary, it has organization into sentences. It is missing a lot of the things that we call paralinguistics, a lot of the things about timing and loudness and pitch. And people try to make up for that in things like using a particular font, maybe doing all capitals for something, maybe underlining, maybe bold facing, maybe writing the word slow, SLOOOOW, to represent that somebody said something very slowly. Maybe, we can do these things. We can try to make text be more like language, but it is impoverished compared to language. There are very tricky, subtle things that we do in speech that carry a ton of information. I can say to you, I hate you. And it can mean just the opposite of what
Right.
the words mean. Sign languages are like that too. They can be very subtle and beautiful. Um, uh, um, it's interesting to watch a deaf child become eloquent with sign, and it is so beautiful to see. Uh, um, yeah, everybody has a right to eloquence. Um, and deaf children, I I can't imagine what you could go through to be eloquent in a spoken language, but you can certainly become eloquent in a sign language. We all should have that right.
And so these video books, and I've had the pleasure of being able to experience two of them, King and King, which was just so good. I really liked it. That's not yours. That's Linda DeHaan's and Stern Nyland, who wrote that, if I'm saying that correctly.
And as far as we know, this is the first LGBTQ book for deaf children, video book for deaf children in the world. So we're extremely happy to have had that privilege.
And then the other one, though, that I was able to read is yours. It's As Night Falls, beautifully illustrated by Felicita Sala, and award winning for those illustrations, if I'm not mistaken,
Oh,
as
yes,
well.
she's magnificent.
They are pretty incredible. But I have to say, the book itself, it starts off, and I felt in the beginning that I felt like I recognized this book in the beginning, how it starts off. It felt like a children's book that I've seen before. But then all of a sudden, the word dinoflagellates pops up, and then we're in a very different place for the rest of this wonderful book that I very much enjoyed. But I got to experience it as a video book. But so for my listeners, can you describe what a video book is?
Right. And there are different kinds of video books. And in Rise, Anytime, any storyteller, okay, let me start over. Storytelling has different traditions in different countries. So, in some oral cultures, being able to retell a story exactly the same way, all the details the same, is considered a beautiful thing. In other cultures, putting your own flair on it, developing it in your way, is a beautiful thing. Um, but the important thing with oral storytelling is that the storyteller is an artist. They are not just presenting you with somebody else's something, they are making this something yours, and it's through their artistry, whatever their artistry is. Storytelling in a sign language is also an art. And um, in in Rise, we try to give deaf children what hearing children have. If you go to a bookstore and you're going to buy a picture book for a 4-year-old that you love or a 2-year-old that you love, you want to love the book yourself. Probably because you're going to have to read it 300 times.
Right.
You better enjoy that book. You better love the illustrations. You better love the words. You better love saying those words. You better get into the artistry of that book. Well, that's what we try to do with Rise. We encourage storytellers read the story. They are not making up the stories. We're trying to give them works. I need to explain why we work from books that they didn't make. Let me explain that later. But they need to read the story, know what it is, and then they need to consider how they would tell this story if a deaf child was sitting in front of them.
Mm.
What they want to get across to that deaf child. And when they do that, they are an artist. And we at Rise, we work with the storyteller. We never tell them what to do. We offer guidance in the beginning because many times deaf people say, "You want me to tell a story? I don't know how to tell a story." I mean, they will be surprised that you look at their signing and you say, "Oh, what a beautiful signer you are. Please, would you consider being a storyteller for us?" They're surprised at that. And so we need to let them know that we respect them, that what they are doing is valuable to us and will be valuable to the children who look at it. So we encourage them to make the book theirs. Now, different storytellers do it very different ways. On Rise, I don't know how many distinct books we offer. It's over 60,
Hmm.
might be 65, I don't know. Um, but and we're always adding new ones. But several of them are in a multiple sign languages. Well, if you look across, you will see that page 4 in this language takes 5 seconds to present, and page 4 in that language takes 25 seconds to present. Now, that's not because the languages are so different, it's because the storytellers are telling them in different ways.
Okay.
In Ethiopia, the group that we work with there, they have in their heads a very strong goal, which is that the book should be able to be used at home, but also in school for children who are learning to read.
Mm.
So they don't want the signer to be saying more than what the words say. So if the words on the page are, "Does the monkey have my shoes?" the words in Ethiopian Sign Language are, "Does the monkey have my shoes?"
Okay.
And it will be, in good Ethiopian Sign Language, it will not it will be in a very different order from the spoken language, whatever. In Italy, however, that same story will be told very differently because they want to use the books at home with the parents to help the parents get into signing with their children. Because there are schools for the deaf, there are good schools for the deaf in Italy, although they have been threatened in recent years, and a very wonderful one in Padua just closed their doors recently.
Hmm.
But they have different goals. And so there will be illustrations on the page, and the signer will say, "Hey, my shoes, I'm looking for my shoes. Um, could they be behind that bush? Could they be in that hole over there? Where could they be? Oh, there's a monkey in the tree. I wonder if the monkey has my shoes." And they'll go through all this stuff talking about the whole background, giving the whole context, referring to the illustration, giving the child the words for bush and tree and
Mm.
just monkey and shoes, giving the child, um, I have to figure this out. I have to think harder. What's a good place to hide shoes? They're giving them so much. They're really developing their vocabulary in a different way. So the storytellers had different goals, and we just support their goals. We are a service. That's all that we are.
Well, and the two goals are it's interesting because, when the American Academy of Pediatrics, and I guess that was 2015, came up with a recommendation of reading 30 minutes a day to a newborn. And, immediately some of the people that championed that finding were in the literacy space. So you saw, English teachers, and you saw that group saying, yes, because we need to keep reading alive. Except for the American Academy of Pediatrics was making that recommendation for a very different
Mhm.
reason. They were talking about, the
Yes.
bonding between the reader and the person being read to, so that it wasn't necessarily being true to the text in a way that would increase, the acquisition of reading skills, but it was all about that relationship. But that is also teaching you that that books can contain these worlds that multiple people can share and that you can create meaning through. So I'm okay either way. I'm okay if you go verbatim or if you're using it to bond and get people excited. I'm not sure. What do you have a preference for how these
um,
video books should be
um,
used?
I don't want to presume.
Yeah.
I don't want to
Yeah.
presume, and one of the things about Rise is we don't give advice because we want parents to share the books in a way that they're happy doing and that their child is happy doing, so that they'll repeat it, so they'll do it over and over again, because shared reading activities are a crucial
Yeah.
foundation for literacy. um, some Many organizations, I shouldn't say many, some organizations make video books for deaf children that are trying to help them learn how to read, and they will come with guidelines for parents. There are
Mm.
parents who are intimidated by guidelines, uh, and and we're also different. We really are different people, and we read the books differently, and we need to feel comfortable. We need to not worry. So many interactions between a hearing parent and a deaf child are full of stress, and you put them together in front of a book, and it's a book with text and
Right.
illustrations, static illustrations, and the child is looking here and there, and the parent is getting more and more worried that this child will never develop an interest in books, this child will never learn to read, this child will never be independent. The child knows that the parent is getting tense, has no idea why, has no idea what to do to make that tension go away. They part and they never want to share books again. They don't want to repeat that horribly stressful experience. That's why video books are a wonderful thing, because even if the parent doesn't tune into the signing, the child will. But I
Right.
promise you, our signers are so glorious. They are so
Uh, t
enthusiastic.
Incredible.
Yes, they're
A
beautiful.
and,
They welcome
you know, and again, I'm an outsider, to this world, trying to learn more about it. What I know is that the signers that I watched in those 2 video books, they were in how they were presenting the visual language, they were giving context. They were creating excitement. It was it w you know, it was, as you'd pointed out, a performance.
absolutely.
It w and so there was, I mean, you talk about, bimodality and bilinguality, but, there was both worked together. I could look at the text, or I could watch not
Mhm,
knowing very much American Sign Language. I could only watch the, person signing, and I was still getting a story.
absolutely.
I don't know if it's a story that absolutely matched these illustrations. So first of all, Donna Joy, we are out of time, even though we went over. This has been so wonderful and so joyful, and I've learned so much. So I just want to thank you so much for being a guest on Talking About Kids, but also just thank you for what you do for kids. It's really
Well, I'm
amazing.
so lucky that I have so many deaf friends that allow me to be part of, the kinds of activities I've been part of. I'm really lucky and happy and grateful.
That was the second part of my discussion with Donna Jo Napoli. If you have not already done so, please go back and listen to part 1. More information about Donna Jo, her books, the research we discussed, and Rise Videobooks is at talkingaboutkids.com. The Talking About Kids theme song is by the Senators. For more of their music, go to thesenatorsmusic.com. And remember, kids are young goats and young humans, and the difference is that young goats are easier to manage.